evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Video Game Cemetery, episode 9. Just barely making it to the end of November, as promised. And today we're going to be looking at one of my all-time favourite Sega video games, released both for the Sega Game Gear and for the Sega Master System. Psychic World. Now, Psychic World on the Game Gear is considerably different to Psychic World on the Master System. Both are equally awesome, but this one I find a little bit easier. And also the level layouts are considerably different. They also use completely different graphics for some reason. Most Master System games used to use the same graphics as the Game Gear versions, except on a wider scale, like you could see more of the screen. But not in this case. Very, very unique specimen. Psychic World is a game that punishes its player at every chance it gets. Saying this game is hard is kind of an understatement. It was released in 1991 on the Sega Game Gear by Hertz, and the Sega Master System by Sanritsu, and it was of course published by Sega. The two different developers may have had something to do with how different both versions are. As I said previously, it was very rare for a Master System version to differ a lot from the Game Gear, as usually, a version on one was identical with the exception of having less screen crunch on the Master System ports. Psychic World was one of these exceptions, but I'll go into this more later. It is worth mentioning, however, that neither the Game Gear nor the Master System versions are the original. No, in fact, the original was released many years before, in 1988, for the MSX2 under the name Psycho World, and was Japan exclusive. This makes the Master System and Game Gear versions ports of the MSX2 version, so to speak. Set in the year 19XX, Psychic World focuses on Lucia, a girl with psychic powers, and her twin sister Cecile, who, alongside Dr. Navik, are studying the mystic abilities of ESP, or extrasensory perception. Anyway, one day, Lucia was getting ready to head to the lab for work when an explosion took place at the lab before her arrival. Lucia finally made it there, but her sister Cecile had vanished. Dr. Navik, however, was unharmed, and explains to Lucia that he was experimenting on monsters that broke free and took Cecile with them. Dr. Navik gives Lucia an ESP booster to enhance her psychic powers, allowing her to attack enemies with them, before she follows the monster's trail in an attempt to save her sister. Considering the age of the game, I'm going to explain a plot twist in this game and not consider it a spoiler. Dr. Navik is an alien. I'm not going to say any more on it, but I'm giving you that much. Psychic World is designed in a very specific way. It punishes the player for both hesitation and for being too quick, which can be a problem when trying to find the perfect middle ground. For those who haven't experienced the game personally, you can to some extent compare it to Mega Man. Certain parts of this game have monster patterns that are designed for fast movement, meaning if you encounter a bouncing enemy, for example, then stopping to fight it might end in death, whereas keeping on running full speed will most likely see you fly underneath them all unharmed mid-bounce. Hesitation is the punishment here, whereas fast movement pays off. However, somewhere like the plains on the first level, running at full speed will often send you flying into an enemy, taking chunks of your life down. Hesitation certainly would have paid off in this situation, and speed was the downfall. So it's really about knowing what fits what situation better. You begin the game with the ability to shoot psychic power towards your enemies. This will kill some enemies right out, but others later are a bit tougher and will require you to level up the ability. You'll also gain other magical attacks, such as being able to shoot fire attacks and ice attacks. These will be important as some enemies are ice-based or fire-based, and using the right one at the right time is vital. The ice will be especially important to learn because at certain times, you'll find giant chasms with no platforms that require you to make them yourself using your ice block ESP. Equally, fire attacks will melt those blocks if they hit them, so you really have to be careful when attacking ice enemies while standing on ice blocks, but using fire attacks. You can also use a temporary invincibility power, which can be very, very useful indeed, especially during boss fights. Lucia also has the ability to restart a level as many times as she wants. I'm not entirely sure the point of it, and I only ever use it when I select it by mistake, mostly, but it is a feature. The game is of course a 2D platformer in the same style as Mega Man. You can climb ladders and jump over spikes, etc, and at the end of each level is a boss fight. These are usually very tough, though I do find they are a lot easier on the Master System version, as they have different patterns and different techniques required to defeat them and are considerably different in general. As a kid, I only had the Game Gear version, and it was a nightmare getting anywhere. In that game I used to die repeatedly. Right here, constantly killed by this flower. Killed by a flower. You can't get more pathetic than that. But in truth, this is still a difficult part to do even now. This is definitely a part where that invincibility power comes into play. The Master System version though is considerably easier, as the layout is different and you have more space to back up and prepare your attack. It's just generally easier here. But that's not to say the Master System version is easy. Oh no, just slightly easier. This game, on whichever system you choose to play it on, takes some serious strategy and skill to get anywhere in at all. The graphics and art for Psychic World are pretty great, to be honest. Again, everything looks very much Mega Man-ish with its own charm. But the interesting thing here is how different the game looks between the Game Gear and the Master System. As I said earlier, the differences may be due to the fact that both versions were made by different companies, and that most likely is the case. The Game Gear version, firstly, suffers a bit of a screen crunch, which is to be expected in a handheld port of the time. It doesn't really affect the game much, though it does make certain parts in particular a little more difficult. That fucking flower comes to mind. Other than that, the sprites look very similar to the Master System, with the exception of everything being scaled down and Lucia wearing purple instead of pink. The Master System version has a more red touch to its browns, and other colours also have a similar saturation. That kind of thing. Also, certain monsters, again that flower comes to mind. Do you think I might be traumatised by it? Certain monsters have completely different sprites, but all in all, both versions do look really nice and feel really nice to play. I wouldn't put one as better than the other, is basically what I'm saying here. The music in Psychic World is pretty great. I always remember the music from the first level, even when I haven't played it for ages. During high school, back 20 years ago or so, I would find myself humming it for no apparent reason, and it would just pop into my head randomly. All the music in the game is of a similar nature, being catchy and memorable, and the 8-bit instruments pull it off really well. The sound effects are simple, yet they portray what they're trying to really well also. The hissing sound of the ESP attacks are nice. They remind me of someone spraying perfume or a bottle of flash in the sink. And the sound of getting hit is like a vibrating buzz, which makes you feel like you're being damaged. Again, the sounds are simple, the music is simple, but it does the job, and I personally really like all of these things. Now, there are certainly flaws in this game. For starters, I think they may have just slightly made this game a little too hard. When I first got the Game Gear one, I was only 11 or 12 max, and I couldn't get anywhere whatsoever. I still loved it up until that flower point, but getting beyond that point was a dream that would remain that way until I reached my 30s. That is not an exaggeration. Also, to switch abilities in this game, you have to first crouch and then press the B button. This pauses danger, so that's okay, but it's a bit of a fiddly setup. Would have been much easier to just use start or select. Finally, it seems that due to how quick health drops, it can be impossible to recover from a fuck up. If you fall into a lava pit, say, massive chunks of your health are lost, and then completing the level becomes a hopeless task. This is of course far worse in the Game Gear version, but if you can deal with these things, or you like your games tough, then this shouldn't be considered a flaw, I guess. The game is available on the Sega Game Gear, the Sega Master System, And of course the original version is available on the MSX2 home computer. If you want to play it legit, as in without using ROMs or bootlegs etc., I would recommend trying the Master System version first, as it has a larger screen and a slightly less punishing difficulty. It is probably the best place to start, and as far as prices go, it's also very cheap. Even the Game Gear version is incredibly cheap, so if you want to buy both, go ahead. I did, but I'm completely insane, so you don't have to be like me. I'd like to suggest a recommendation for the MSX2 version, but I've never seen one for sale anywhere, and not many people have MSX2s anymore. But hey, if you have one and know where to get it, go for it. Just remember, it's called Psycho World on that version, not Psychic World. So all in all, you have 3 legit different ways to experience this game. And although I'd recommend the Master System first, any of these are a great option. My personal favourite is the Game Gear, mostly due to nostalgia. But like I said, they are all great options. If I was to sum up Psychic World in 1 or 2 words, I'd probably describe it as good but difficult. I do love the game, I think it's absolutely insane, which is definitely my cup of tea, but it's not really suited for the casual gamer. Mega Man experts probably have a better chance of surviving this ordeal, but even then I can't promise that, as I'm not a Mega Man expert myself. Would I recommend it? Yes, definitely. Is it a good game? Yes, definitely. Is it beatable? Yes, by a handful of people. Mind you, practice does make perfect, so who knows? You might find it a complete walk in the park. I doubt it, but it is possible, I guess. Yeah, the game is great. Should definitely get some more attention in any of its forms, but it is extremely tough. And if you can love it for what it is, like me, then you'll be happy you purchased it. I really do believe it to be an underrated game, and I think despite difficulty and a few flaws here and there, it most definitely earns its place on the shelves of the video game cemetery. And that was Psychic World on the Sega Game Gear and the Sega Master System, so you got kind of a 2-in-1 with this episode. As I said at the beginning of the video, I just barely made it in for the end of November with this video. I did promise another one this month, and here it is. Just cutting it fine, but I made it. Please leave a like or subscribe or a comment. Anything like that would help me a lot. It does help the channel, but in no way are you forced to do it. If you don't feel like you want to do it, then don't do it. No one's making you. Just watching my videos support enough, like I always say. Next month will be my final episode of Series 1, so please stick around and I hope you'll be there to watch it. It's not going to be Christmas themed, as I said in my last video, but it is going to be my Christmas episode-ish. So I hope you stick around and I hope you look forward to it, because it's going to be a unique one. Thank you so much for watching the Video Game Cemetery, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.